whatever will be, will be. And for example, in the Madeleine McCann case, where there is a huge establishment lie, in my opinion, being told about it, the public really aren't buying it now. And there has been a bit of a sea change in that one issue. And if the truth can come out on that issue, perhaps people will realise just how many lies the media do spin on other issues.
Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. You'll be pleased to know this programme is not sponsored by bloody mouse mesh. Did you know that mice can squeeze through gaps the size of a pencil? Did you also know that mice can find their way to the surface of Mars? That is, if you believe NASA images. Now, as people's heads have become filled with more and more lies acquired from years of mainstream media propaganda, it is now becoming increasingly difficult to have a simple conversation with ordinary everyday folk. I've started using a stopwatch to see how long people can hold a conversation with me before they say something which is wholly untrue or unevidenced, but which they annoyingly believe to be true. Most people don't get past 60 seconds, but what can you do? People's minds now consist of two very distinct compartments, although most don't realise these compartments exist. The first compartment consists of everything they see and hear firsthand in their own lives, in their own space, which they know to be true. The second compartment consists of everything they are told by the media, which they have been shown no proof of, but they generally believe to be real. If you listen to people talk, it is easy to identify which of the two compartments they are speaking from. People will flip from one to the other without realizing it. When they flip from real world to media fantasy world, they will often start their sentence with, "Did you see that program?" Or, "It said in the paper." When they start their sentence with these words, it is your job to point out to them that they have just switched to the non-proven compartment of their mind, so you are now going to put earplugs in if they don't stop talking shit. Stephen Hawking has been in the news again. Or perhaps I should say the person pretending to be Stephen Hawking. And just who is controlling that voice box of his? Hawking, according to The Independent, said, "Leaving Europe threatens Britain's status as a world leader in science and innovation." Really? Leaving Europe threatens Britain's status as a world leader in science and innovation. That doesn't sound like a very scientific statement to me. It sounds more like fear-mongering from a source which is attempting to manage public opinion using a fake role model. MI5 must now have a whole department dedicated to writing the crap that comes out of Stephen Hawking's voice box.
If I sound like Stephen Hawking, do you think people will believe everything I say?
$12.99 from any good toy shop. You just set the switch to Hawking, speak clearly, everyone believes everything that you say. Don't make the mistake of setting it to Davros. Now, let's consider the issue of spying. Spying is the obtaining of information considered secret or confidential without the permission of the holder. So if somebody makes an accusation that they've been spied on, due to the secret nature of spying, it is sometimes difficult to prove. The people you would expect most likely to be spied on are the important or the powerful. So when Donald Trump made a claim that he had been spied on, my reaction was, that doesn't surprise me, tell me more. But apparently, according to the BBC, GCHQ have denied they spied on Trump. Yep, the intelligence agencies feel the need to deny this. If an intelligence agency feels the need to deny something, you know you've hit a nerve. When our wholly untrustworthy mainstream media is trying to convince us that Trump was not spied on, you know the opposite is probably true. More on Trump later. But before that, sustainability, the new word I am sick and tired of hearing. Ask yourself, just what is it exactly they are trying to sustain? The planet, I hear you say. Really? I would contend that the thing they are actually trying to sustain is control over your mind. Control over your mind so that you keep your hands off the planet while others benefit from and become the owners of the planet. The sustainability psyop relies heavily on public gullibility. It's not the planet that needs saving, it is those that disguise their motives with words like sustainability that needs saving, or preferably put in a capsule and ejected off the planet, which is a very rich planet. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for coming along this evening, everyone. There's a guy came in earlier on. Let me just turn that down, yeah. Who's travelled all the way to Merthyr from Italy. He didn't choose London or Manchester. Thought he'd come to Merthyr. But that's because Merthyr's the centre of the known universe, obviously. Incredible. Okay, yes, thank you to each and every one of you for coming along, because the majority of the proceeds from these lectures is what funds my research and my films. So by coming along this evening, you funded a whole, another year of Rich Planet. Okay. Now, tonight I'm going to talk in part one for about an hour and a half. I'm going to talk about my new Madeleine McCann film. I'm going to talk about the fakery war, and I'm also going to talk about the Bridgend suicides, which is obviously local to this area. I've done a bit of research into that. We'll have a 15-minute break, and in part two, I'll speak for an hour. I'm going to talk about NASA and the moon landings. I've got some new information on that. And I'm also going to talk about my film UFOs and NATO, and I've got some new information on that as well. Yeah, I thought I'd put a picture of Trump up because I assumed that people would want my opinion on him. And when he got elected, people were quite excited because they were saying things like, well, he's going to make friends with Russia, create world peace, and he's going to sort out all of the fake news in the mainstream. But I actually think his policies may well be academic. And to explain that, I just want to introduce this guy. This is Barry Trower, who I met last year. I did a 2-hour-long interview with him. Barry Trower worked for MI5 and other parts of the government for many, many years. He's an expert on how microwaves affect people. He's also worked as a spy. So he was given a job in a prison as a PE teacher. But his real role, he was actually spying on the inmates to try and get information out of them regarding child abuse or VIP's involvement in child abuse. So this is what Barry Trower had to say about the security services and how they operate.
If I can just say one thing to the young people watching this. Now, I spent 11 years talking to spies and I know how they work. And I say this at conferences, to young people especially, be careful what you put on your social media website. Your password is irrelevant. If you type in, let's say you're 15, I went to a party, I smoked marijuana, and I didn't like it, I was sick and I won't do it again. Okay, that's now on your website. I'm dating this girl, we're both only 15, but we had sex. I'm still with her, we're married now, we're happily married. And I'm glad that we started our relationship and it went where it did. Everything's forgotten. And this is how spies work. 20 years, 30 years is nothing to a spy. Nothing. They will come back to you 20 years, 30 years later. Hello, Mr. Smith. You won't know me. You are now the CEO or the government minister or the head of a bank or whatever. I have your reference here for your job. You didn't actually say, because I have your other document here, Facebook, you didn't say that you had underage sex with a girl underage. That is illegal, underage sex. You didn't say that in your reference. You didn't say that you took drugs in your reference. Now, this can be made known, and you can resign in disgrace, and your children will come out of their private school. And I know this happens. Your children will come out of Eton or whatever, and this and this and this and this, and your wife will probably leave you, and you will have to sell your big house. Or you can sign one document and we will leave you alone forever. And the document is usually a reference or a passport to verify an identity for somebody who is another spy, to give them status and a job. And now they are in the country, they have status. It will be a civil service job or some other job. They will work their way up. And this is how spies work. And they are already going into other countries' Facebooks and what have you, gathering this information, and it is sitting there.
Scary stuff. So what he's saying is they collect information on everyone in case you become a person of influence. Now just consider Donald Trump. He has been a person of influence for decades, and I suspect that Donald Trump is an intelligence agency's dream. So when you consider his financial affairs, his private life, and his alleged links with Jeffrey Epstein, I suspect the CIA have got a filing cabinet full of dirt on Donald Trump. So that means the CIA could probably get rid of him like that whenever they want to, which means what he's trying to do is pretty much academic. Now, I just want to mention WikiLeaks here because if you've watched Rich Planet for any length of time, you will understand that it's my opinion that WikiLeaks is just a CIA front. It's not what it purports to be, and it's being used for psychological operations. That's not to say that some of the information isn't real that it puts out, but in my opinion, it's been done by the CIA. Where's your proof of that, Richard? Well, I'm not going to present that today, but I am intending to do a whole program about WikiLeaks with Andrew Johnson, with something that we're working on just to expose what's going on with them. Now, if we consider that in relation to the emails that were leaked, Hillary Clinton's emails just before the election, many people think that she would have been elected if those emails weren't leaked. So that tells me that perhaps the CIA selected Trump. Very interesting. Now, I'm not saying that Trump is working for the CIA, but why might he have been their man? Well, I can give you my hypothesis as to what I think might be going on in the world today. Trump would be considered to be a very nationalistic president. So he wants to close the borders, he wants to renegotiate trade deals. We've also had a nationalistic movement in the UK with Brexit. And there are also moves in Europe where we've got increased nationalism. Now, many people believe that strong nation states is the only thing that will oppose a one world government, new world order, centralization of power that everybody fears. Okay? So my suspicion is that Trump, Brexit, and what's happening in mainland Europe are all fake nationalism. So they're forms of nationalism that have been set up to eventually fail. That's my opinion. And you will often hear Brexit and Trump in the same sentence in the mainstream. Is it really true that we've got these three simultaneous nationalistic movements happening at the same time? Or have they all been set up to fail? So that's just my opinion. As I say, it's just an opinion. I've not got any actual proof of that. And I mentioned Julian Assange, and here he is at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Now, Ecuador has very good relations with the United States. I can't think of any reason why it would sully that reputation by protecting this guy. And if Julian Assange is dangerous and is wanted by the United States, why haven't they issued an extradition request for him? Because I'm not aware that they have, like they did with Gary McKinnon. This is all theatre, in my opinion, to try and big up in people's minds this fake hero. But as I say, I do intend to do a program all about Assange and WikiLeaks in the coming year. Andrew Johnson and myself, we did a program all about David Icke. And that program, we said a lot of good things about David Icke. The intention of it was to find out where the good information stops and where the disinformation begins. And we're going to do the same with Julian Assange. And if you want to get information, at least on what Donald Trump is trying to do, don't get it from the BBC website, don't get it from The Guardian, just go onto the White House's own website and watch these daily briefings with this guy, Sean Spicer. It'll tell you at least what their agenda really is, rather than what the BBC tells you it is. Now, just to a little bit about Rich Planet and where I started on this journey. I started in 2008 with a website all about UFOs. That website was seen by this fringe TV channel, and they invited me to make some low-budget TV programs, which I did. I made 6 TV programs, and then I found out about other cover-ups and conspiracies and being involved in that. So I've made programs about 9/11, the London bombings, all kinds of things. And as I say, started in 2008. I've now produced over 200 programs. This is my 8th UK speaking tour. Now, last year, you might have noticed that I only made 12 programs, but these are much longer and far more in depth because they're not being made for television. It's not worth me being on television anymore. They really were clamping down on what I could say. So it became completely useless to be on television, quite frankly. So I'm going to continue with this format next year. So 12 TV programs spread over 24 weeks, fortnightly. That then gives me time to make films and do detailed investigations. Now, one of the detailed investigations that I did last year was an investigation into the Didcot murders. So this is murders which occurred in May 2015 when 21-year-old Jed Allen, who had no history of violence, he was known as a gentle giant by his friends, is alleged to have murdered his mother with a hunting knife, who he loved, his stepfather, who he had a good relation with, and his baby sister, 6-year-old sister. He's supposed to have murdered all 3 of them with a hunting knife and then fled the area and then killed himself. There was no motive at all. And the other thing that set alarm bells off for me is the way that it was reported. So he texted all his friends to say, yeah, it was me, and then he conveniently commits suicide. Now, I wanted to investigate this case because it was reasonably close to where I was living in South Wales. So I went to the inquest, I spoke to many of his friends. And when I first started looking into it, I thought it's some sort of mind control thing because the guy just had no motive to kill his whole family. But after I went to the inquest and did some inquiries, I learned that this case is all about drugs because Jed Allen's mother was a long-term heroin user. And right at the time of the murders, there was a very, very powerful drugs gang who'd been running all of the drugs in Didcot for over 10 years. They were awaiting trial, okay? So I'm convinced that the murder of the whole family was connected to drugs. And this is how he was portrayed in the mainstream media, because he happened to like the character Wolverine. And this tells me that this cover-up was run right from the top. Now, I don't believe that the police were involved in the murders, but I believe that it suited the police's agenda to run the investigation to frame him, right? I believe others murdered the whole family, but I believe that the police had a reason why they framed him. It suited their agenda. And the Oxfordshire Guardian felt it necessary to try and debunk my film, because people in Didcot were starting to watch it. Conspiracy claim on triple murder slated. So in this article, the police are actually quoted. The police are quoted in denying the findings of my documentary, as is the mayor of Didcot. Mayor of Didcot, Steve Connell, said, "I think it is in incredibly poor taste. I don't think it should be given the time. I don't even think it should even be talked about. I heard about it. I haven't watched it, and I refuse to." So if he hasn't watched the film, how does he know it's in incredibly poor taste? This is the kind of idiot we have in positions of responsibility in our country. And I have discovered that the mayor here played on the same rugby team as one of the drugs gang that were under investigation when the murders occurred. And if you go to the comments section on that news article, you will find 20 comments. 18 of them are supporting my documentary. So this represents kind of a deviation for me into the area of true crime. Now, since I've got involved in true crime stories with the MADELINE case and the Derek Bird case, I've got to know some very knowledgeable people who've looked at other cases, like the Jill Dando case, or the Sarah Payne case, or the Soham case. And there are so many cases where there's been an element of police cover-up, or I should say government cover-up, because sometimes these police cover-ups are approved from above chief constable level. And there are so many cases that need to be exposed. I could spend the rest of my life exposing the true crime cases. Now, you're not going to find these exposés on Panorama or Dispatches with Mark Williams Thomas, right? What he does, he protects existing cover-ups, that guy, right? You're never going to find a genuine journalist, even the likes of John Pilger on mainstream. They're not there to try and unravel government cover-ups or police cover-ups. But as I say, it's just, there's cases begging to be exposed, let me tell you. Right, which brings you on to the Madeleine McCann case. Now, in my last Madeleine McCann film, I mentioned a guy called Peter Hyatt, this American guy, and I said that, he'd expressed his opinion on the case. After the film went out, I was contacted by him, right? I hadn't had any contact before that. This is an American guy who's an expert on witness statements. So he can read a police witness statement and he can tell you, usually within seconds, if that person is lying, why they are lying, what they are lying about. He's an expert in language. He looks at every little verb and pronoun. It's incredible. He's like a scientist on language. And he can, if you're lying to him, he will spot it like that. Okay, so he emailed me to tell me that I'd said something which wasn't quite right in my documentary. So I emailed him back and said, well, what's your opinion on the Madeleine McCann case? So he gave me his opinion. So I said to him, well, would you do an interview? And gladly, he agreed. This guy has trained the FBI, US law enforcement, lawyers in the United States, and he runs college courses on statement analysis. So I went over there in November last year, and I did a 2.5-hour interview with him. Cost me £900 in total to get a plane and all the rest of it. That was the total cost. But that's been funded by you. Rich Planet people coming to these talks, and I hope you think it was worth it. Those of you who've seen the Peter Hyatt interview, right? Because this is new evidence, really, or new analysis with regards to the Madeleine McCann case. So Peter Hyatt analysed an interview that the McCanns had given in 2011, and this is his conclusions. Madeleine is dead. The death was not intentional. The McCanns have disposed of the remains in a hidden manner, and they feel confident will not be found. The cause of death may have included causing her to be very sleepy and a fall. They have feared being accused. The time frame must be questioned, and there's a strong possibility of sexual abuse. Now, those conclusions line up closely with the conclusions in my previous 3 films, and he hadn't even watched those films. So if you want to find the truth about the Madeleine McCann case and the facts, then go to madelinefilms.net, where you will find the most detailed documentary series ever produced about the case. So we've got 14 hours of documentary now that I've produced on this. Don't get it from the BBC. And on this year's tour, I am launching my final Madeleine McCann film entitled Madeline, Why the Cover-Up? And this film addresses 2 questions. Firstly, how might Madeline have died? Because it's my strong belief that Madeleine McCann did die days before she was reported missing. And secondly, why might that have caused an establishment cover-up? We see the image here of Madeline. It's actually a composite of 2 images. The bottom half of the body is Madeline sitting by the pool, which is alleged to be the last image of Madeline that I say was taken, or I suggest was taken, on the 29th of April. The McCanns say it was taken on the 3rd of May. The face, that image wasn't released until 2010. But I suspect that that image is also from the holiday, because the length of the hair is the same, and we've also got a Mediterranean-style property in the background there. All right, so the composite image is what I suspect Madeline may have looked like shortly before she died. But you need to see the film in order to understand that. Now, in the film, I spend a whole hour, this is a 3-hour-long film and split into 2 parts. I spend a whole hour on Robert Murat. Now, Robert Murat was arrested for the abduction of Madeleine McCann, or suspected of it, by the Portuguese police, but he was found to have no involvement. And some people think that the McCanns knew Robert Murat. Some people think he had absolutely nothing to do with the case. It causes a lot of confusion in people's minds. There's a lot of argument over what his role was in the case. So I've dealt with this in this new film. Now, you need to watch the film in order to understand what I'm going to say here, right? All the evidence is in the film, because he was interviewed And in his first interview, he comprehensively lied about his whereabouts. The police then got his mobile phone records and they found where he'd been because of the mobile phone pings. So they then re-interviewed him and he had to admit that he'd been to certain places. And when you look at where those places were, the picture starts to come clear, in my opinion. So these are my beliefs about Robert Murat. These are beliefs. They're not statement of legal fact. Here we go. This is what I think his role was. I believe he was in England when Madeleine McCann died. I believe that he acted in 2007 as an agent of British intelligence. All of the evidence for this is in the film. I believe he was quickly recalled to Portugal immediately after Madeleine died. I believe his role when he got there involved the following: to find a property in Lagos where Madeleine's body could be hidden on behalf of British intelligence, offering to act as an interpreter for the Portuguese police and thus infiltrate their investigation on behalf of British intelligence, and thirdly, being used as a fake perpetrator for Madeleine's faked abduction on behalf of British intelligence. And there's a question mark in my mind on that third one as to whether he agreed to be a patsy, whether he agreed to be the fall guy. Now then, if you go out the street and you ask people's opinion on the Madeleine McCann case, people now are starting to question, and they do think that the McCanns may have been responsible or involved in some way. But what most people don't realise is the establishment-led cover-up. So many government organisations and media organisations involved in assisting in this cover-up. And one of the key people has been Clarence Mitchell. Clarence Mitchell, who I said in a previous talk, or I suggested, because I've had it from two different sources, that he's MI5. Clarence Mitchell, the compulsive liar manipulating the British media. He's been the key figure behind all of these bullshit Madeleine McCann headlines, and they're still coming out even now. Got one here. This is a front page headline right at the start of my UK tour when I'm launching the next film. Someone is protecting Maddie kidnapper. Full page headline right when I start the tour, and that happened last year as well. So this guy's behind all these headlines. Now then, but I don't think he's the only person in mainstream media who's working for MI5. This is Martin Brunt, who is ostensibly Sky News' senior crime correspondent, but I suspect this guy's MI5 too. Martin Brunt is the man who knocked on the door of Brenda Leyland, who happens to have an opinion on the Madeleine McCann case, and he started saying, well, the police are very interested in what you've got to say on the internet. So she fled her house. She didn't want to be interviewed. Not long after, she was dead. Tragic. Now, in the film, there's a phone call featured between Martin Brunt and Robert Murat, because when Murat became a suspect, the Portuguese police started bugging his phone. And there are a couple of phone calls between Murat and Martin Brunt in the Portuguese police file. So I've transcribed them and it's in the film. And it's fascinating to listen to and try and figure out what the hell they're talking about. Martin Brunt is trying to help Robert Murat out of the hole that he's in. This is meant to be an independent Sky News journalist, and he's saying, well, look, if you say this or that in the interview, we can make you look really good. We can get public opinion on your side, which is really strange. Murat's concerns in this telephone call is he's trying to appoint a new lawyer. Because if you consider what I had on that previous screen, let's just say that's true, that Murat had been recalled to Portugal to hide Madeleine's body on behalf of the British intelligence, right? And then he's been fingered by the Portuguese police who don't know any of that, right? He's got to get the right lawyer because he needs to tell them everything, right? You can't appoint a lawyer that's going to spill the beans that Murat's working for British intelligence. So he's very, very concerned, and he's asking Martin Brunt's advice on where will I get a lawyer? And at one point in the telephone call, Murat says, I don't want to end up in prison. Firstly, for something I did not do, and secondly, for something that would break their contract rules. And as soon as he said that, Brunt says, I understand the sensitive nature of everything that we have been working with since we arrived here. So in my opinion, what's happening here is that Murat is mentioning in his contract with the British security services, and Brunt is saying, shut your mouth, Robert, because this call's been recorded. Because earlier on in the call, Brunt tells Murat that he thinks the call might be being recorded. So this is one MI5 warning another, or trying to help out another MI5 agent. As I say, all the evidence for that is in the film. This is what it says about Martin Brunt on Wikipedia. He has a reputation for gaining insider information. High praise for the Sky News crime correspondent Martin Brunt when a hack from another newspaper phoned Suffolk Police Press Office with a query on the serial killer case. He was told, call Martin Brunt. He knows everything before we do. A little concerning. Brunt was the first to report the arrest of Amy Winehouse and the resignation of Sir Ian Blair as Metropolitan Police Commissioner, and was the first to interview Robert Murat when suspected of involvement in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. His contacts, and this is a key one, his contacts led to Sky News being the first to report that the 7th of July events in London were the work of terrorists. And we know, because of all of the research that you've seen on Rich Planet, that it was not the work of terrorists. It was a setup. The guys weren't even on the tube trains when they were blew up. They were murdered by some government agents at Canary Wharf. So if Martin Brunt's been given that information first, that it's the work of terrorists, you know he's got access to sensitive information. And breaking the news of the Queen Mother in 2010, Brunt reported live from Rothbury. So to me, that is strong evidence for what I'm saying. That, and this really is what the Leveson inquiry should be addressing. That we've got these shills in our media that aren't working for the interests of the public. That's not what they're there for. They are there helping to run government or intelligence cover-ups. And they're the main guys that you see speaking in mainstream news. And that's what the Leveson inquiry should be addressing, in my opinion. Not the flipping phone hacking shit. Right. Which is just a phony bone of contention. Now then, I would ask you to consider that the cover-up of the Madeleine McCann case goes much, much wider than most people realise. I would ask you to consider that it has included all of these different genres. And because of that, because it's included all of these genres, you know there's a big, dirty secret at the centre of it that they're protecting. So I would suggest that chat shows have been used to cover up the facts about Madeleine McCann, opera, This Morning, Loose Women, TV dramas, which I'll come on to, similar cases, which I'll come on to. True crime programmes, such as Crime Watch, have helped cover up the facts about Madeleine McCann case. Documentaries, such as Panorama, Dispatches, have helped cover up the facts about Madeleine McCann. If you watch their documentaries and watch mine, you can only come to that conclusion, that those documentaries